Everyone believed he was dead. I stood at his funeral. I saw his coffin lowered into the ground while his mother screamed and collapsed into her sister's arms. I watched them throw dirt onto the polished wood. I heard the sound it made. And yet last night, my phone rang at 3:47 a.m., and his name was on the screen. That's when I realized the real story had never been told. My name is Sarah, and this is my confession about the 6 years I spent believing a lie, and the 3 weeks it took for that lie to destroy everything I thought I knew about reality. Let me start at the beginning, because that's the only way this makes sense. Though I'm not sure anything will ever make sense again. It was 2018, early autumn. I was 24 years old, working as a junior editor at a small publishing house in Portland. My life was unremarkable in the way that most lives are at that age. I had a small apartment with a roommate who was never home, a job that paid just enough to cover rent and student loans, and a group of friends I'd known since college. We'd meet every Thursday at the same bar, drink the same cheap wine, and complain about the same things. It felt stable, safe, predictable. David was part of that group. Not my boyfriend, though people often assumed we were together. We dated briefly in our sophomore year, one of those intense college relationships that burn bright and fast and leave you wondering if you ever really knew the person at all. After we broke up, we somehow managed to stay friends. Real friends. The kind who could sit in comfortable silence or have conversations at 4 in the morning about whether consciousness was just an accident of evolution. He was a photographer, freelance, always traveling for work. He had this restless energy, like he couldn't quite settle into ordinary life. His apartment was barely furnished because he was hardly ever there. He'd disappear for weeks at a time, then show up at the bar on Thursday with stories about abandoned buildings in Detroit or fishing villages in Alaska or whatever strange corner of the world had called to him. I didn't understand it then, but that restlessness was the first sign that something was wrong. The last time I saw David alive, if that's even the right word anymore, was September 14, 2018. I remember the date because it was my roommate's birthday and I was supposed to meet her for dinner, but David had texted me asking if I wanted to grab coffee first. Something in his message felt urgent, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the time stamp, 11 in the morning on a Friday when he was usually sleeping off whatever adventure he'd had the night before. We met at our usual place, a cafe near Powell's Books that made terrible coffee but had good light and quiet corners. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the back, staring at his phone with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. He looked afraid. "Hey," I said, sliding into the chair across from him. "You okay?" He looked up, and for just a moment, I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. But then he smiled, that familiar crooked smile, and the moment passed. "Yeah, just tired. Had a weird week." "Weird how?" He hesitated, fingers drumming against his coffee cup. "I've been working on this project. Documentary photography. There's this abandoned hospital up near Longview, and I've been going up there to shoot. But yesterday, I don't know, something felt off." "Off how?" "Like I wasn't alone, like someone was watching me." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I'm probably just paranoid. The place is huge and it's got that horror movie vibe, you know? Empty hallways, broken windows, all that. Gets in your head." I should have pressed him harder. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't, because this was David, and David was always getting himself into strange situations and walking away with good stories and better photos. We talked about nothing important after that. He asked about work. I complained about my boss. He showed me some of the photos he'd taken, stark black and white images of decay and emptiness that were somehow beautiful. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my roommate asking where I was. And I had to go. "See you Thursday?" I asked, standing up. "Yeah," he said, "Thursday." That was the last conversation we ever had. 3 days later, on Monday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a voicemail from Marcus, another friend from our group. His voice was shaking. "Sarah, call me back as soon as you get this. It's about David. There's been an accident." My hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial. Marcus picked up on the first ring. What happened? I asked. He's dead, Sarah. David's dead. The words didn't make sense. They were just sounds, syllables without meaning. What are you talking about? The police called his emergency contact, his mom. He went up to that hospital again, the one in Longview. They think he fell through a rotted staircase. Someone found his body this morning. I don't remember much about the rest of that day. I know I called in sick to work. I know I sat on my apartment floor and stared at the wall for hours. I know my roommate came home and found me there and didn't know what to say. The funeral was the following Saturday. Open casket, which his mother insisted on even though the funeral director advised against it. There had been damage to his face from the fall, but she wanted to see him one last time. We all did. I stood in line with the others, waiting my turn to approach the coffin. When I finally looked down at him, at the body that was supposed to be David, I felt nothing. Not grief, not shock, just a strange numbness. He looked wrong somehow. The shape of his face, the color of his skin, the way his hands were folded. All of it felt like a bad copy of someone I used to know. This was the moment I stopped trusting my own memory. But I told myself that was normal. That's what death does. It makes people look like mannequins of themselves. I told myself I was in shock, that grief was making me see things that weren't there. I told myself a lot of things in those first few weeks. The investigation was brief. Accidental death. No signs of foul play. David had been trespassing in a dangerous building, taking unnecessary risks like he always did, and this time it had killed him. The police found his camera bag at the scene, though the camera itself was smashed beyond repair. His car was in the parking lot. His wallet was in his pocket. Everything pointed to a tragic accident, nothing more. We all tried to move on. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Marcus organized a memorial where we shared stories and got drunk and cried. David's mother cleaned out his apartment and donated most of his things. His photography website stayed up for a few months and then expired, the domain eventually bought by someone selling SEO services. Life continued in that relentless way it always does, even when you're certain it shouldn't. For 6 years, I believed he was dead. I moved forward. I changed jobs, moved to a better apartment, dated other people. I thought about David sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep, but the pain dulled into something manageable. A scar instead of an open wound. And then, 3 weeks ago, everything changed. It started small. That's how these things always start, isn't it? With something so minor you almost dismiss it entirely. I was scrolling through Instagram on a Tuesday night, mindlessly liking photos of people's dinners and vacation selfies, when I saw a username I recognized. One of David's old accounts, the one he'd used to post behind-the-scenes shots from his projects. It had been dormant since his death, frozen in time like a digital grave. Except now there was a new post. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I swear I felt it freeze in my chest. The photo was a black and white image of an empty hallway, institutional and cold. No caption, posted 40 minutes ago. I stared at my phone screen so hard my eyes started to water. This couldn't be real. Someone must have hacked the account. That was the only explanation. Hackers did this kind of thing all the time, didn't they? Taking over dead people's social media for some sick joke or scam. I should have reported it. I should have closed the app and gone to bed. Instead, I clicked on the profile. There were more photos, all posted in the last month. All the same style as David's work, that stark documentary aesthetic he'd perfected. Abandoned buildings, empty rooms, shadows and decay. No people, no faces, nothing that could identify who was behind the camera. My hands were shaking. I went to the followers list, looking for someone I recognized who might have noticed. But the account only had 37 followers now, mostly bots and spam accounts. Everyone who'd known David had probably unfollowed years ago, unable to bear the reminder. I took screenshots of everything. Then I did something I can't fully explain. I sent a direct message. Who is this? I didn't expect a response. I thought I was shouting into a void, performing some meaningless ritual to make myself feel like I was doing something. But 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. One word, soon. I dropped my phone like it had burned me. It clattered onto my coffee table and I just stared at it, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. David was dead. I'd seen his body. I'd watched them bury him. But then why was someone using his account? And why had they responded to me specifically? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible explanation. Hacked account, some kind of automation, a cruel prank from someone who knew about David's death. Maybe even his family had given someone access to preserve his work or something. None of it felt right. If I had ignored that message, I would still be safe. The next morning, I called Marcus. We'd drifted apart over the years, the way friends do when the thing that bound you together is grief and you all just want to move on. But he picked up on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Sarah, what time is it? Have you seen David's Instagram lately? Silence. Then, what are you talking about? I explained about the posts, about the message. As I talked, I could hear him waking up, probably pulling up the app on his own phone. Jesus, he said finally. That's fucked up. Someone must have hacked it. That's what I thought, but Marcus, the photos. They look exactly like his work. Lots of people do that style. Urban exploration, abandoned places, it's basically a whole genre on Instagram now. He was right, of course. He was being rational while I was spiraling into something I couldn't quite name yet. I sent them a message, I said. They responded. Another pause. What did they say? Just one word. Soon. Okay. That's creepy as hell. You should report the account. Get Instagram to take it down or at least lock it. Yeah, I said. Yeah, you're right, but I didn't report it. I kept watching, checking the account every few hours like someone checking a wound to see if it's healing. More photos appeared, always the same type, always empty, always unsettling in a way I couldn't articulate. On Thursday, 6 days after the first post I'd noticed, I got a phone call. It was 3:47 a.m. I know because I looked at my clock when the ringing woke me up, my heart already racing from being jolted out of sleep. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and that's when I saw the name on the screen. David Morrison. His contact was still in my phone after all these years. I'd never been able to delete it, some sentimental attachment to a past that no longer existed. But his number had been disconnected years ago. I'd tried calling it once, about a year after his death, when I'd had too much wine and was feeling maudlin. It had been reassigned to someone else by then, a confused woman who'd told me I had the wrong number. So how was his name appearing on my screen now? My thumb hovered over the answer button. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me not to pick up. This was a prank, a scam, something malicious designed to hurt me. But something else, something deeper and more desperate, needed to know. I answered. Hello? Static, just static, the sound of an empty line. I was about to hang up when I heard it. Breathing, not heavy, not theatrical, just the quiet sound of someone inhaling and exhaling. Someone on the other end of the line, listening to me the same way I was listening to them. Who is this? My voice cracked. The breathing continued for another moment, and then the line went dead. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, telling myself over and over that there had to be a logical explanation. Spoofed caller ID, random coincidence, some glitch in my phone's contact system, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to tell me something. Or warn me about something. Or prove something I wasn't ready to accept. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 3 days later, on Sunday afternoon, when I was getting groceries. I was in the produce section of my usual Whole Foods, examining avocados with that focused intensity you develop when you're trying not to think about the fact that you might be losing your mind, when I saw him. David, standing at the end of the aisle, partially obscured by a display of organic apples, wearing a dark jacket with the hood up. Just standing there, watching me. I froze. The avocado fell from my hand and rolled across the floor. My vision tunneled, the edges going dark. It was him, the same height, the same build, the same way of standing with his weight shifted slightly to the left. He turned and walked away. I ran, abandoned my cart right there in the middle of the produce section and ran after him, ignoring the startled looks from other shoppers. I pushed through the crowd at the deli counter, knocked into someone's cart, kept moving. I burst through the automatic doors into the parking lot, looking frantically left and right. He was gone, if he'd ever been there at all. A store employee followed me out, asking if I was okay, if I needed help. I must have looked insane, wild-eyed and panting, scanning the parking lot like I was searching for a threat. I told her I was fine, that I'd thought I saw someone I knew. She looked at me with that particular kind of concern people have for strangers who are clearly not fine, then slowly backed away. I sat in my car for 45 minutes, shaking. I knew what I'd seen, but I also knew it was impossible. David was dead. I'd been to his funeral. I'd seen his grave, unless the body in that coffin hadn't been David at all. This was the moment everything I thought I knew began to unravel. I drove home on autopilot and immediately called Marcus again. He didn't answer. I tried 3 more times before leaving a voicemail that I'm sure sounded completely unhinged. Marcus, call me back. I think I saw David. I know how that sounds. I know, but I saw him. At the grocery store. It was him. Call me back. He didn't call back that night. Or the next day. When he finally did reach out, it was via text. Sarah, I think you need to talk to someone. This isn't healthy. He was right. I knew he was right. But I also knew what I'd seen. The problem was reconciling those two truths, and I couldn't. I started doing research. I know that sounds crazy, but what else was I supposed to do? I pulled up every article one could find about David's death. There weren't many. A brief obituary in the local paper. A short news item about the accident. Nothing detailed, nothing conclusive. I found the name of the detective who'd handled the case and called the police station. He'd retired 2 years ago. I tracked down his personal number through a combination of Facebook stalking and pure desperation. When I finally got him on the phone, he sounded confused about why I was asking questions about a 6-year-old accidental death. I remember the case, he said. Young photographer, fell through some stairs in an abandoned building. Tragic but straightforward. Why are you asking about this now? Did you identify the body yourself? The medical examiner did the formal identification. Matched fingerprints from his driver's license record. Why, are you sure it was him? A long pause. Miss, I understand you're grieving, but yes, we were sure. The ME doesn't make mistakes on something like that. I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't help you. He hung up before I could ask anything else. Fingerprints. They'd matched fingerprints. That should have been enough to convince me. That should have ended it. But it didn't, because the calls kept coming. Every few nights, always around 3:00 or 4:00 a.m., my phone would ring with David's name on the screen. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. It didn't matter. When I answered, all I heard was breathing or static or, once, what sounded like footsteps echoing in an empty space. When I didn't answer, the voicemails were always the same, just the sound of silence, like someone had called and was simply waiting. I blocked the number. A new number would call. I blocked that one. Another would appear, always with David's name attached somehow, like whoever was doing this had access to my phone's contact system. The Instagram posts continued too. A new one every few days. Always architectural, always abandoned, always empty. I scrolled back through them obsessively, looking for clues. For some detail that would prove this was or wasn't David. And then, 2 weeks after that first call, I found something. In one of the photos, a shot of a long hallway with peeling paint and broken light fixtures. There was something in the corner. Small enough that I almost missed it, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. A date, scratched into the wall. September 14, 2018. The last day I'd seen David alive. My blood went cold. I zoomed in on the photo, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone steady. The scratches were crude but deliberate. Someone had carved that date into the plaster with something sharp. I screenshot the photo and sent it to Marcus with a single message: "Look at the wall." This time he called me back immediately. "Where was this taken?" he asked, his voice tight. "I don't know. It's from that Instagram account." "Marcus, that's the date of." "I know what date it is." He was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, this is really fucked up. Someone is messing with you. You need to go to the police." "And tell them what?" "That someone is posting photos on a dead man's Instagram account? They'll think I'm crazy. Then stop looking at it. Block it. Delete the app if you have to. This isn't healthy. You're seeing things that aren't there." "I'm not crazy," I said, but even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. After we hung up, I sat in the dark of my apartment and thought about David. Really thought about him, about the person he'd been. Restless, secretive, always chasing something just out of reach. He'd had this theory about photography, that what made a good photo wasn't what you included but what you left out. The empty spaces, he called them. The places where the viewer's imagination filled in what the camera couldn't capture. What if his death had been an empty space? What if we'd all filled in our own narratives without really questioning the official story? I needed to know for sure. I needed to see the place where he'd died. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove north to Longview. It took about an hour, and I spent the entire drive trying to talk myself out of what I was doing. This was insane. I was becoming obsessed with something that had no basis in reality. I should turn around, go home, maybe actually make an appointment with a therapist like Marcus had suggested. But I kept driving. The abandoned hospital wasn't hard to find. It sat on the edge of town, a sprawling brick complex that had been closed for over a decade. Chain link fencing surrounded the property, plastered with no trespassing signs, but the fence was damaged in several places where other urban explorers had created access points. I parked on a side street and approached on foot. It was a gray Tuesday morning, drizzling in that constant Pacific Northwest way. No one was around. I found a gap in the fence and slipped through, my heart pounding. The building was exactly like the photos David had shown me all those years ago. Broken windows, crumbling brick, the kind of industrial decay that photographers loved. I could see why he'd been drawn to it, but I could also see why it was dangerous. Parts of the structure were clearly unstable, sagging in places, overgrown with ivy and moss. I found the main entrance. A set of double doors that had been pried open so many times the locks were useless. I hesitated at the threshold. Everything in me was screaming to turn back. But I'd come this far. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mold and rot. My footsteps echoed on the stained linoleum floors. Graffiti covered the walls, layers and layers of it, tags and messages and crude drawings. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, sweeping it across empty rooms and long corridors. I was looking for the staircase. The one where David had supposedly fallen. I didn't know exactly where it was, but the building wasn't that large. If I searched systematically, I'd find it. It took me 20 minutes. A stairwell at the east end of the building, the stairs themselves partially collapsed, creating a jagged gap like missing teeth. This was it. This was where David had died. I stood at the edge and looked down into the darkness below. The basement, or maybe a sub-basement. I couldn't tell how far down it went. I aimed my phone light down and saw concrete, debris, broken boards. No blood, no signs of an accident at all. But then, 6 years had passed. Time and weather and other trespassers would have erased any evidence long ago. I was about to turn away when I noticed something. On the wall next to the stairs, at about eye level, someone had written something in black marker. "Sarah, Third floor, room 317. My name, my actual name, written on a wall in a building where I'd never been until this moment. I ran, not toward the exit, but up the stairs that were still intact, taking them two at a time, my breath burning in my lungs. I had to find room 317. I had to know who had written my name and why. The third floor was worse than the lower levels. The floor was spongy in places, water damaged and unreliable. I moved carefully, testing each step, following the room numbers stenciled on the walls. 301, 303, 305. Room 317 was at the end of the hallway. The door was closed, which was unusual. Most doors in the building were either missing or hanging open. I turned the handle. It wasn't locked. The room was empty except for a single chair in the center, facing the window. And on the chair was an envelope with my name on it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a single piece of paper, torn from a notebook. David's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. If you're reading this, you didn't let it go. I knew you wouldn't. Meet me where we had our last coffee. Tomorrow, noon. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. They're watching. I stood in that abandoned room holding a letter from a dead man and felt my entire understanding of reality shift beneath my feet. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly for hours, the letter sitting on my passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. Every rational thought I'd ever had was warring with what I'd just found. This couldn't be real. David was dead, but that was his handwriting. I was sure of it. By the time I got back to Portland, it was evening. I sat in my car outside my apartment for a long time, trying to decide what to do. I should call the police. I should call Marcus. I should do anything except what the letter told me to do. But I knew I was going to that cafe. I had to. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't focus on anything. I kept rereading the letter, looking for some sign that it was a forgery, but I couldn't find one. The handwriting was too perfect. Even the way he'd signed it, just a D with a line under it, was exactly how he used to sign notes. At 11:47 p.m., my phone rang. David's name on the screen again. This time I answered immediately. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Did you find it?" A man's voice, whispered, distorted somehow. I couldn't tell if it was David or not. "If this is some kind of sick game. Tomorrow, noon. Don't be late." The line went dead. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat up all night researching everything I could find about David's death again. About ways to fake a death. About fingerprint matching errors. About anything that could explain what was happening. I found stories about people who'd disappeared and reappeared years later, but they were always explained. Witness protection, escaping abuse, mental breakdowns. None of them fit what was happening here. At 11:30 the next morning, I left my apartment and walked to the cafe. It was only a few blocks away, and I wanted time to think, to prepare myself for whatever was about to happen. The place was moderately crowded, the usual midday mix of freelancers on laptops and retirees reading newspapers. I got a coffee I didn't want and sat at the table where David and I had last met 6 years ago. The same table in the back corner with good light. I waited. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped. I watched the clock on my phone tick from 11:57 to 11:58 to 11:59. Noon came and went.